The dream was always the same. The scratchy wool of the blanket against my skin, the faint smell of mothballs and dust in the production team leader's spare room, and the face of the man I had loved since I was a girl, Leo, contorted into a mask of cold resolve as he pushed me forward. "It's for the best, Maya," he'd whisper, but in the dream it was a hiss. "This way you'll stay here with me. You'll see." Then I would fall not onto the bed but into an endless, suffocating darkness, only to wake up gasping, the ghost of his touch, a brand of betrayal on my arm. But this time was different. This time I didn't wake up in my safe city bedroom. I woke up on that very bed in that very room. The heat was the first thing I registered. A dry, feverish burn that started under my skin and pulsed outwards. My mouth was parched, my thoughts syrupy and slow. The voices from outside the door were not dream echoes. They were real, cutting through the cottony haze in my head. "Just make sure she's taken care of, David. Keep her here." It was Leo. My Leo. His voice was low, earnest, but with an undercurrent of something I'd never heard in it before. A calculating chill. "You don't need to ask twice, Leo." That was David Chin, the production team leader. A man of few words, with a quiet intensity that had always made me slightly nervous. "For Clara I would do anything. This will secure her happiness. She'll be free to be with you without any complications." Clara. The name was a splash of cold water. Clara Vance. The new educated youth from the South, with her delicate features and a voice like tinkling bells. Leo's white moonlight. The woman he claimed understood his soul in a way his childhood shadow, never could. A fragment of memory, sharp and brutal, pierced through the drug-induced fog. Leo handing me a bowl of tea-soaked eggs just an hour ago. "You look pale, Maya. You need your strength. We have to talk about our plans." Our plans. The 2 permits to return to the city, secured by my family after I'd begged and pleaded. I'd thought I was saving him, saving us. I'd discovered Clara's secret. Her father was a convicted traitor, a political stain that would not only ruin Leo's future but also devastate his prestigious family. I was bringing him home to safety, to our old life, to the future we'd always planned. And he had thanked me by drugging me and delivering me to another man. The fury that rose in me was a living thing, so potent it momentarily cleared my head. He wasn't just leaving me, he was destroying me. He was ensuring I could never go back, that I would be trapped here in this countryside village, married to a man who was only taking me as a favor to his own unrequited love, Clara. David Chin was just as much a pawn in this as I was, a blindly infatuated fool willing to ruin a woman's life for the sake of his beloved's happiness. My body screamed in protest as I forced myself to sit up. The room tilted, the heat inside me warring with a cold, sharp terror. I couldn't stay here. If David Chin came in, if he found me like this. In this era, a woman's chastity was her entire worth. If we were found together, compromised, I would have no choice. My future would be sealed. Gritting my teeth, I stumbled toward the back window. It was a small, rickety thing, overlooking the narrow stream that ran behind the row of houses. My limbs felt like lead, every movement a Herculean effort. I could hear the murmur of their voices moving closer to the front door. With the last of my strength, I hauled myself over the windowsill and tumbled out into the cool evening air. The drop was short, but the world spun as I landed heavily on the muddy bank. Without a second's hesitation, I rolled into the stream. The water was shockingly cold, a blessed relief against my feverish skin. The village stream wasn't deep, but its bed was littered with jagged rocks. As I fell, a searing pain shot up my arm. A sharp stone had slashed a deep gash from my elbow to my wrist. Blood, dark and vivid, bloomed in the water. The pain was a gift. It sliced through the last of the drugged haze, sharpening my senses, anchoring me to the brutal reality of my situation. I didn't dare cry out. I had to get away. I was a strong swimmer, a skill learned during long hot summers in the city pools. I let the current pull me downstream a ways, away from David Chen's house, before I dragged my soaking, shivering body onto the opposite bank. My arm throbbed, blood still flowing freely. I ripped a strip of fabric from the hem of my tunic and tied it tightly around the wound, my hands shaking. My clothes were soaked, my teeth chattering, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I made my way back to the educated youth's point, sticking to the shadows. The compound was quiet. I slipped into the women's dormitory, my heart hammering against my ribs. Thankfully it was empty. I changed into dry clothes with frantic speed, my fingers fumbling with the buttons. The plain, blue cotton tunic felt like armor. I was just pulling on my dry pants when I heard voices outside, his voice and hers. Leo and Clara. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I moved silently to the door, pressing my ear against the rough wood. "Don't worry, Clara," Leo was saying, his voice dripping with a tenderness he'd never used with me. "I'll stay here with you. I'm not going anywhere." "But Leo," Clara's voice was a breathy, worried whisper. "I heard Maya already got the permits. 2 of them. If you don't go back with her, your parents, they'll be so angry. They'll cut you off." "Don't worry," he said, and I could hear the arrogant confidence in his tone. Maya won't be going anywhere. That was my cue. The cold fury I'd felt in the stream solidified into a hard, diamond-sharp resolve. I took a deep breath, smoothed my damp hair and pushed the door open. The moment Leo saw me, his face went slack with shock. His eyes widened, darting over me as if I were a ghost. Clara, standing close enough to him that their shoulders were touching, took a quick, guilty step back. "Maya," Leo stammered, recovering slightly. You're back. Weren't you? David said you fainted at his place. I was just about to take Clara to check on you." I looked at him, at his perfectly feigned concern, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to rake my nails down his face and show everyone the monster hiding underneath. But I didn't. I simply stood there, my gaze cold and level. "So that was the plan, was it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Take Clara to David's house to check on me? To catch me in a compromising position with him?" Leo's face paled. "What? No. Maya, how can you think that?" I ignored him, my eyes shifting to Clara. She looked like a frightened dove, her large eyes wide, lower lip trembling. She was the picture of innocent victimhood, and I knew Leo ate it up. "I came back to pack," I said flatly. "It seems my presence here is inconvenient." Leo's confusion was rapidly being replaced by panic. He had expected to find me ruined and grateful for his subsequent rescue, or at least trapped and powerless. He had not expected me to be standing here, clear-eyed and accusing. "The permits," he started, his eyes searching mine. "What are you planning to do with them?" And there was the real question. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about what I would say when I went back to the city without him. I gave him a thin, lifeless smile. "Since you're not going back, there's no point in me returning alone. I plan to sell them. I'm sure there are plenty of educated youths who would pay a fortune for a ticket home." The relief that washed over his face was so palpable it was insulting. He thought he was safe. He thought my selling the permits meant I was cutting ties, that I would stay here, defeated, and he could continue his idyllic secret romance with Clara without fear of exposure. Clara, however, looked at me with a new, calculating glint in her eye. "City permits are so valuable these days," she said, her voice sweet but with a sharp edge. "I'm so jealous of you, Maya. Just selling one will set you up for a long time. Not like me, I came here with nothing." Leo's chest swelled with misplaced heroism. He put a protective arm around Clara's slender shoulders. "Don't you worry about a thing. Maya," he turned to me, his tone now one of casual entitlement. "Once you sell those permits, lend me some money, will you? Winter is coming. Clara has nothing. I need to buy her quilts, a padded jacket, some proper boots." I stared at him, this boy I had loved for most of my life, and I felt nothing but a vast, hollow emptiness. The love was gone, burned away in the fire of his betrayal. All that was left was the cold certainty of my new path. I would not be his victim. I would not be anyone's pawn. I was going home. And I was going to make sure he got exactly what he claimed he wanted. The silence after they left was louder than their voices had been. It was a heavy, ringing quiet that pressed in on my ears, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart. The adrenaline that had carried me from the stream through the confrontation was ebbing away, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the throbbing, insistent pain in my arm. I looked down. The makeshift bandage was already soaked through, a dark, ugly red staining the blue of my tunic. I couldn't ignore it. Pushing the fatigue aside, I wrapped a cleaner piece of cloth around the wound and headed for the village clinic. The doctor, a kind, older man with tired eyes, clucked his tongue as he cleaned the gash. "A nasty cut, Miss Lynn. How did you manage this?" "I fell by the stream," I said, my voice flat. "Slipped on a rock. He didn't press, his skilled hands working quickly to stitch the wound. Each prick of the needle was a sharp reminder of my new reality, a punctuation mark on the end of my old life. When he was done, he handed me a small packet of antibiotics and painkillers. Keep it clean. Come back in a week to have the stitches removed. I thanked him and paid with a few crumpled notes, the physical pain a dull echo of the deeper, more profound ache within. But even that inner ache was fading, replaced by a cold, clear-headed purpose. My next stop was the state-run canteen. I hadn't eaten all day and the gnawing hunger in my stomach was becoming impossible to ignore. I pushed open the door, the smell of grease and steamed buns washing over me. And there they were. Sitting at a table in the corner as if they hadn't a care in the world were Leo, Clara, and David Chin. They were sharing a plate of dumplings, laughing at something David had just said. David's eyes, when they rested on Clara, held a soft, unguarded devotion that made my skin crawl. He was doing Leo's dirty work for a smile from her. Leo saw me first. His laughter died in his throat, and he stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the concrete floor. Why, you're in the commune? Why didn't you tell me you were coming? My eyes didn't meet his. They were fixed on the bicycle parked just outside the canteen door. It was a flying pigeon, a sturdy, reliable model. My brother had given it to me when I was first sent down, worried I'd have to walk everywhere. Leo, ever the charmer, had insisted on being my personal chauffeur. I can't have my girl tiring herself out, he'd said, and from that day on the bike had become his. The seat that was meant for me had long since been claimed by Clara. A wave of disgust washed over me. How many times had I watched him pedal away with her, her arms wrapped around his waist, her laughter trailing behind them. I had made excuses for him, told myself he was just being kind to a fellow educated youth who was struggling. I had been such a fool. I need the bike for the next few days, I said, my voice cutting through his false concern. I'm taking it back. Clara's mouth fell open in a perfect O of surprise. That bicycle, it's not yours, Leo? Leo's face flushed a dull red. He hated being embarrassed, especially in front of her. It was a gift from Maya's brother, he muttered, unable to meet her eyes. I didn't wait for further discussion. I walked past them to the counter, handed over my grain coupons and money, and bought 4 meat buns. The aroma was intoxicating, but I had no appetite to eat there, surrounded by their hypocrisy. I walked out, tucked the buns into my bag, and swung a leg over the bicycle. The feel of the handlebars under my hands, the solid frame beneath me, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I didn't look back at them as I pedaled away. I could feel Leo's stunned gaze burning into my retreating back, and a small, savage part of me hoped it hurt. The next morning I was up with the sun. My arm was stiff and sore, but the clear morning air felt like a baptism. I had a mission. I pedaled my bicycle, to the production team in the neighboring village. I was looking for an old high school classmate, Alex Wong. Alex came from a wealthy family. His parents were doctors and he'd always been a bit of a dandy, even here in the countryside. He was surprised to see me, his eyebrows shooting up when I explained why I'd come. A city permit? For sale? He whistled, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. You're serious, Maya? Those are like gold dust. I'm serious, I said. 300 yuan. No haggling. He didn't even blink. Done. But, he leaned closer, his voice dropping. Don't give me the cash directly. My parents are paranoid. Send it to me by post, to this address. He scribbled an address on a scrap of paper. I agreed. 300 yuan was a small fortune. It was the price of Leo's freedom, and now it was the seed of my own. When I returned to our commune, I went straight to the unofficial, unspoken of black market. I found a buyer for the bicycle within an hour. Another 120 yuan. I felt a twinge of loss. It was a gift from my brother. But sentimentality was a luxury I could no longer afford. I needed capital, not memories. Returning to the village, I went through my belongings with a ruthless eye. I had been hoarding things for a future with Leo. Food coupons, fabric coupons, sugar coupons, meat coupons. I had saved them, dreaming of setting up a home together. Now they were just paper. I took almost all of them to the black market and sold them for a fraction of their face value. The money I got was just enough for a train ticket home. Finally, I gathered all the cash I had, the money from the permit, the bike, the coupons, plus the 200 yuan my parents and brother sent me every few months, and went to the post office. I filled out a money order and sent every last cent to my brother. I was cutting my ties and securing my escape route. I was leaving, and I was leaving Leo to the life he had so desperately chosen. As expected, he came to find me that evening. He found me mending a pair of socks outside the dormitory, my expression neutral. "Maya," he began, his tone a familiar blend of affection and entitlement. "I heard you sold the permit. Good. Look, Clara didn't bring much with her, and the winter here is harsh. Lend me 30 caddies of grain coupons, will you? And some meat and fabric coupons. I want to take her to the cooperative, get her some proper clothes and some brown sugar. She needs building up." He spoke as if it were the most natural request in the world. As if, even after everything, my resources were still his to command. When I didn't immediately respond, he misread my silence for jealousy. A smug little smile touched his lips. "Maya, are you jealous? I admit I used to confuse familial affection with love. But Clara, she's my true love. Even if we can't be together, you'll always be like a little sister to me. Now go get the coupons. Your future sister-in-law is waiting." Little sister. The condescension was breathtaking. I let out a small, quiet laugh and calmly spread my hands. "You're too late. The money and coupons I didn't need I sent to my brother." His face darkened instantly. "Your brother? He's in the military. He has everything provided. What does he need with all that?" "What a thing to say," I replied, my smile widening just a fraction. "You're allowed to fall in love, but my brother isn't? He's older than you know. The organization is finally introducing him to someone. I think a wedding is on the horizon. Of course he needs money and coupons." Leo clenched his jaw, the muscle ticking. "Something this big. Why didn't you discuss it with me first?" I looked at him with genuine surprise. "Leo, our families aren't related. You yourself said we're just ordinary neighbors. Why should I report my family's business to an outsider?" The word outsider struck him like a physical blow. He flushed, speechless for a moment. Then a nasty, knowing smirk twisted his features. "I see. You're jealous. You still have feelings for me. You knew I promised Clara new things, and you deliberately sent everything away to make me lose face in front of her. Admit it." I was so angry I laughed. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the man. "Leo, do you think you're made of gold? That every woman who sees you must fall at your feet?" I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Let me tell you the truth. My brother asked me to return to the city because he's arranged a blind date for me. Someone from his unit. I've already agreed. So you can relax. I won't be standing in the way of your epic romance." The smirk vanished from his face, replaced by a stunned blankness. "A blind date? You're going back to the city for a blind date? Why would I tell you?" I asked coolly. "What relationship is left between us now?" He stared at me, his confidence visibly crumbling. He was so used to my unwavering presence, my endless tolerance. He had taken my love for granted, and now the ground was shifting beneath his feet. His expression hardened into a mask of wounded pride. "Fine," he spat out, the word sharp and cold. "You said it yourself. Don't come crying to me later." He turned on his heel and stalked away, his shoulders stiff with outrage. I watched him go, the hollow space in my chest filling not with sadness, but with a profound and liberating sense of finality. The strings were cut. He was free. And so was I. The days after my final confrontation with Leo were a study in quiet, methodical deconstruction. I was dismantling the life I had built here, brick by brick, and with it, the intricate safety net I had woven for him over the years. It was a net he had never even known existed, one he had mistaken for the solid ground of his own talent and charm. My first target was the small locked suitcase under my bed. It was heavy not with clothes or keepsakes but with medicine. Leo suffered from hereditary asthma. Before we were sent down, I had been terrified of him having an attack out here, far from proper hospitals. I had spent weeks calling in favors, pleading with family friends who were doctors, even trading some of my mother's precious stockpile of coffee for a few precious inhalers. The case was a compact pharmacy. Imported bronchodilators, traditional Chinese herbal remedies for lung qi deficiency, epinephrine injectors for a severe emergency. It represented countless worried hours and a significant portion of my family's resources. I carried the case to the black market. The man who ran the stall, a shadowy figure everyone just called Old Lee, opened it and let out a low whistle. Western medicine, he murmured, his fingers gently tracing the boxes. Very difficult to get. Very expensive. I know, I said, my voice flat. I want to sell it all. He didn't ask questions. He counted out a stack of bills that made my head spin. It was more money than I had ever held at once. I took it without a word, the weight of the cash in my hand feeling like justice. Let Leo rely on the village clinic's limited supplies when the winter winds kicked up the dust. Let him see how far his charm would get him when he was gasping for air. Next was the more delicate task of managing his reputation. Leo was intellectually arrogant. He looked down on the villagers, considering them backwards and simple. He had a knack for making cutting remarks about their superstitions, or their lack of education, often within earshot. In the past, I had been the one to smooth things over. I'd sold the solid gold fountain pen my father gave me for my 16th birthday, a treasured heirloom, and used the money to buy cartons of Flying Horse cigarettes, bottles of strong Baijiu, packets of fine tea, and the rare, brightly wrapped candies from Shanghai. Whenever Leo offended the village party secretary by questioning his crop rotation methods, or insulted the wife of the production team accountant by calling her folk remedies primitive nonsense, I would be the one to appear at their door later, my arms laden with gifts, my face a mask of apologetic sweetness. Uncle, Auntie, please don't mind Leo, I'd say. He's from the city, his head is always in his books. He didn't mean any disrespect. He actually admires your wisdom so much. I would lay the bribes, always framed as gifts from my family, on their tables, and their stern expressions would soften. They would nod, accepting the tribute, and Leo would remain blissfully unaware that the respect he commanded was purchased, sip by sip, smoke by smoke, by the girl he considered his possession. I couldn't take those gifts back, but I could ensure I would never have to give another. I went to see the village chief, a shrewd man named Uncle Feng who had always been kind to me. I brought him the last of my good tea. Uncle Feng, I said, pouring him a cup. I've come to say thank you for all your kindness these past years. He took the cup, his eyes knowing. You're leaving, little Maya? I am. I'm returning to the city to get married. I let the statement hang in the air. I wanted to let you know personally so you wouldn't wonder. And, so you'd know that from now on I won't be around to manage Leo's affairs. Uncle Feng took a slow sip of tea, his gaze steady on me. He was a man who understood the unspoken language of the village. He knew exactly what I was saying. Leo is a grown man, he said finally. He should learn to manage his own affairs. A man who cannot speak for himself is not much of a man. Relief washed over me. The message would be passed along. The unofficial protection I had bought for Leo was being revoked. I spent the next 2 days doing the same with the other key figures in the village. The party secretary, the head of the women's association, the head of the militia. The message was always the same, delivered with a polite smile. I am leaving. My connection to Leo is severed. You will deal with him directly from now on. Some of the village women who had watched the drama with Leo and Clara unfold with keen interest, clucked their tongues sympathetically. Good for you, girl, one of them said, patting my arm. That one has his head turned so far by that southern fox spirit, he can't see what's right in front of him. You're smart to cut him loose. A tree that's rotten at the core will only fall and crush you. I gave away or sold off everything else I couldn't take with me. My spare quilts, my cooking pots, my wash basin. I sold them cheaply to the villagers, half as a bargain, half as a final gesture of goodwill. I was shedding my skin, lightening my load for the journey home. On my last full day, I pedaled to the commune to buy some local specialties, dried mushrooms, wild honey, a few pieces of hand-woven cloth, to bring as gifts for my family. As I was leaving the general store, my arms full of packages, I heard a familiar, gratingly confident voice. I turned and saw him at the post office counter. Leo. And trailing behind him like a faithful shadow was Clara. She was wearing a loose, ill-fitting floral jacket that swallowed her slender frame, making her look even more fragile and victimized. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened and a flicker of pure guilt crossed her features before she could compose herself. Guilt for what? I wondered. The answer came quickly. Leo emerged from the post office, struggling under the weight of 2 large, bulging parcels. Perhaps because the boxes blocked his view, he didn't see me standing just a few feet away. He was too busy preening for Clara. See, Clara? I told you it would work. I wrote to Maya's brother. Told him her winter coat had been stolen and she was freezing. Look what he sent. Not just an army coat but a brand new windproof hat, sheepskin gloves, wool sweaters, the works. He hefted the boxes, a smug smile on his face. Maya has more than enough clothes. She'll never miss these. You can have them. He finally noticed me. The smug smile froze, then shattered. Shame, hot and humiliating, flooded his face, turning it a mottled red. I felt a cold fury settle in my stomach. He had sunk to a new low. Not only was he stealing from me, but he was impersonating me to manipulate my own brother. I walked toward him slowly, each step measured. I stopped directly in front of him, my gaze locked on his. Without a word, I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The crack echoed in the quiet street. Leo staggered back, his hand flying to his cheek, his eyes wide with shock and fury. "Leo," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You have some nerve. First you take my things. Now you impersonate me to swindle my brother? If you have a shred of decency left, you will hand over everything my brother sent me. Right now." He stared at me, his face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Shame, rage, and a desperate, grasping entitlement. "Maya, I know it was wrong to trick your brother," he stammered, his hands still clutching the parcels tightly. "But can't you just consider it me borrowing from him for a while? You and your brother have so much. Clara has nothing. She's poor but she's proud. She'd never ask her family for help. You have a family but she only has me." The self-pitying nobility in his tone made me sick. "Leo," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "If Clara only has you, then you should find a way to take care of her. Don't use my family's resources to buy her affection. I will say this one last time. Either you return my brother's parcels now, or I will go straight to the Public Security Bureau and report you for fraud and impersonation." The threat hung in the air. The commune was small. A crowd had already begun to gather, drawn by the spectacle. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. Clara, seeing the tide turning, didn't say a word in his defense. She simply took a few subtle steps back, distancing herself from the debacle, her eyes cast down in a show of meek distress. Leo Shaw, the boy who prized his dignity above all else, stood exposed in the middle of the street, a thief caught in the act. The humiliation was too much for him to bear. "Fine," he snarled, his voice cracking with rage. He shoved the two heavy parcels at my feet. The corner of one box caught my shin, sending a jolt of pain up my leg. I didn't flinch. Take it. Take it all, Maya. You'll spend your whole life counting every penny. You could never understand someone like Clara. She may be poor but she has integrity. And you? All you care about is money and coupons. You're shameless." He was projecting, screaming his own flaws at me. I simply watched as he turned and stormed off, pushing his way through the crowd. Clara shot me one last venomous glance before scurrying after him. I stood there, the weight of the packages at my feet, the sting in my leg, and the eyes of the commune upon me. But for the first time since I had woken up on David Chen's bed, I felt a sense of profound, unshakable peace. The final thread of the net was cut. He was truly on his own now. I bent down, picked up my brother's gifts, and walked away. I didn't look back. The journey back to the city was a blur of rattling train cars and shifting landscapes. I sat by the window, watching the endless, monotonous fields of the countryside give way to the occasional factory, then to the sprawling, familiar outskirts of home. The two large parcels from my brother were stowed safely above my head, a tangible promise of a new beginning. Sitting across from me was Alex Wong. True to his word, he had helped me haul my luggage onto the train, grumbling theatrically the entire time about being used as beast of burden. "I hope you know, Maya Lin," he'd said, wiping imaginary sweat from his brow as we finally collapsed into our seats, "that this act of Herculean labor entitles me to at least 3 home-cooked meals at your house. My mother's cooking has ruined me for all other food, but I'm willing to make the sacrifice." I'd laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt strange and wonderful. "I'll see what I can do. But my parents are rarely home. You might have to settle for my cooking." "Ah," he'd clutched his heart in mock horror. A fate worse than farm labor. The easy banter was a bomb. It was so different from the tense, emotionally draining interactions I'd had with Leo for the past year. With Alex there was no subtext, no hidden meanings, no walking on eggshells. He was frivolous on the surface, but there was a straightforward decency underneath that I appreciated. When the train finally pulled into the station, the cacophony of the city was both overwhelming and comforting. The blare of horns, the shouts of porters, the sheer press of humanity. It was the sound of life, of progress, of the future I had almost lost. We managed to get my things into a pedicab and directed the driver to my family's apartment complex. The streets, once familiar, now seemed both the same and entirely new. I was seeing them through the eyes of someone who had been away, who had fought to get back. When we arrived at my building, I felt a flutter of nervous excitement. I paid the pedicab driver, and Alex and I began the arduous task of carrying my bags and the 2 large parcels up the stairs. We reached my door and my heart sank. A cold, brass padlock hung from the latch. I sighed, scratching my head in embarrassment. I should have known. My parents. They're both researchers at the institute. They live in their labs more than they live here. Alex straightened up, his playful demeanor vanishing and replaced with a look of genuine respect. Your parents are scientists? The ones working on the new energy projects. I nodded, surprised he knew. You've heard of it? Everyone has, he said, his voice earnest. They're building the future. You should have led with that. Come on, let's go to my place. My mother would never forgive me if I let the daughter of national treasures fend for herself on her first day back. His reaction was so immediate, so sincere, it touched me. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely honored. We unlocked my door and stowed my luggage inside. The apartment was dusty and quiet, filled with the ghostly silence of absence. It felt empty, but it was my emptiness. It was freedom. Just as we were turning to leave, I saw a familiar figure walking down the hallway towards us. It was Auntie May, Leo's mother. Her face, usually composed and gentle, was etched with deep worry lines. When she saw me, her eyes lit up with a desperate hope. Why, you're back, she rushed forward, grabbing my hands. But, where is Leo? Why didn't he come back with you? I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She had always been kind to me, treating me like the daughter she never had. She didn't deserve the pain her son was about to bring down upon their family. I took a deep breath. There was no kind way to say this. Auntie May, I said softly, guiding her to a bench in the hallway. Leo, he chose to stay. I told her everything. Not with malice, but with a simple, brutal honesty. I told her about Clara Vance. I told her about Clara's background, about her father's treason conviction. I explained how Leo had fallen for her, how he had refused the permit, and how he had planned to stay in the countryside with her. As I spoke, the color drained from Auntie May's face. When I mentioned the word traitor, her whole body began to tremble. He can't, she whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of fury and terror. Does he not understand? Our work, his father's and mine, it's all classified. A connection like that, it would be the end of everything. She stood up abruptly, her maternal concern now overridden by a cold, survivalist instinct. I have to go. I have to find his father. She hurried away, her steps unsteady. I knew where she was going, straight to her husband's high-security research unit. The fallout would be swift and severe. I turned back to Alex, who had been waiting quietly, his expression sober. Sorry about that, I said. Don't be, he replied. Some knots need to be cut, not untied. Now come on. Let's get you that meal. I've suffered long enough. We went to his house. The Wang family lived in a spacious, well-appointed apartment that spoke of their former bourgeois wealth. But it wasn't ostentatious. It was comfortable, filled with books and art. His parents, upon learning who my parents were, treated me not just as their son's friend, but with a kind of reverent hospitality. Mr. Wang had brought home an array of dishes from a state-owned restaurant. Braised pork belly, sweet and sour carp, a whole duck stewed with potatoes. It was a feast the likes of which I hadn't seen in years. But it was the soup that undid me. Mrs. Wang ladled out a bowl of lamb and radish soup, the aroma rich and savory. It's nothing special, she said modestly. We have it all the time. My husband says it builds strength. I took a sip. The flavors exploded on my tongue. The tender lamb, the sweet, soft radish, the deeply savory broth. It tasted like home, like safety, like a world away from gritty cornbread and thin rice porridge. I must have made a sound because Mrs. Wang beamed. You like it? Good. From now on, if your parents are working, you come here. We always have too much food. You'll probably get sick of lamb soup though. It's a staple in this house. And so, for the next 2 weeks, that's exactly what I did. I settled back into city life, cleaning the apartment, visiting old friends, and eating dinner nearly every night with the Wong family. I was enveloped in a warmth and normality I had almost forgotten. The peace was broken by a phone call from my brother, Liam. "Why, I got your money, thank you. Now listen, I've spoken to a comrade in my unit. A good man, solid. He's coming to the city on leave next week. I've set up a meeting." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Liam, that's not necessary anymore." "What do you mean, not necessary?" His voice was sharp with big brotherly concern. After the Leo debacle, his faith in my judgment was non-existent. I took a deep breath. I've met someone here. His name is Alex Wong." Silence on the other end. "Then, I'm coming home." True to his word, Liam was on leave the next evening. When he met Alex, I saw the critical appraisal in his eyes. The once-over he gave every potential threat. But Alex, to his credit, didn't try to be anything he wasn't. He was respectful, well-mannered, and when Liam subtly probed about his family background, the fact that they were patriotic former industrialists who had donated their factory to the state scored significant points. I could see the wheels turning in Liam's head. Good family, no political baggage, and he seemed to make me laugh. It was more than he'd hoped for. He extended his leave without telling me. 2 days later, he essentially marched Alex and me to the marriage registration office. "It's a formality," Liam said, his tone brooking no argument. "But it's a necessary one. It provides stability, clarity." Alex looked at me, a question in his eyes. I thought of Leo, of betrayal, of being offered up like a sacrificial lamb. Then I looked at Alex, with his open face and his easy humor, who had offered me lamb soup and a place at his family's table without a second thought. I nodded. "Clarity sounds good." We filled out the forms, had our picture taken, and were handed 2 small red booklets. Our marriage certificate. Felt surreal but not wrong. It felt like a promise, a conscious step onto a new, solid path. Liam finally looked satisfied. He clapped Alex on the shoulder. "Take care of my sister." It was both a welcome and a warning. After he returned to his unit, Alex and I began the process of formally uniting our lives. We went door to door in our housing compound, distributing wedding candies, small packages of lucky, sweet treats. When we approached the door to Leo's family's apartment, we could hear the shouting from down the hall. "You will not marry that girl. Do you understand me? She is the daughter of a traitor." It was Uncle Song's voice, thunderous with rage. "I have to. She's carrying my child. I have to take responsibility." Leo's voice, shrill and defiant, echoed back. Alex and I exchanged a look. We didn't need to hear any more. The consequences of Leo's choices were unfolding exactly as I knew they would. We placed the wedding candies quietly by their door and walked away. The next day, the news spread through the compound like wildfire. Uncle Song and Auntie May had published a formal announcement in the newspaper, severing all ties with their son. They had given him 500 yuan, a final, bitter severance package, and washed their hands of him. But the stain was already set. My father came home that evening looking grim. "The review board paid a visit to the Songs," he told me over a quiet dinner. "They've been removed from all classified projects. Suspended indefinitely. With in-laws like the Van Cess, they'll never be allowed back into a position of trust. To have a son so foolish, it is the greatest tragedy for a parent." I thought of Auntie May's kind eyes and felt a fresh wave of sorrow for her. But my sympathy for Leo was gone. He had made his bed. Now he was lying in it, hundreds of miles away, with the woman he had chosen over his family, his future, and me. I was free. I was safe. I was married. The past was finally, truly behind me. The red of my marriage certificate was a vibrant, shocking splash of color in the muted tones of my old life. It felt less like a romantic union and more like a treaty, a mutually agreeable alliance that promised stability and a clear path forward. Alex and I settled into a comfortable, if somewhat hurried, rhythm. We divided our time between my dusty, quiet apartment and the warm, noisy chaos of the Wong household. Mrs. Wong, true to her word, fed me lamb soup with a frequency that was both endearing and slightly comical. "A growing girl needs her strength," she'd insist, ladling out another bowl despite my protests. I was no longer a growing girl, but in her care I felt myself healing, filling out the hollows that heartbreak and betrayal had carved into me. Meanwhile, the ghost of my old life began to send back echoes. The first news came from a former village mate who had also managed to return to the city. She visited me one afternoon, her eyes wide with gossip. "You won't believe what's happening with Leo, Maya," she began, accepting a cup of tea. "It's a mess." According to her, after I left, Leo's life had begun a rapid and steep decline. The village officials, no longer receiving my placating gifts and apologies, had quickly reassigned him. The easy administrative work was gone. He was now on ditch digging and fertilizer spreading duty alongside the strongest and surliest of the local laborers. He actually went to complain to the party secretary, my friend said, snorting with laughter. Told him he was an intellectual and his talents were being wasted. The secretary just looked at him and said, "Your talents? Your only talent now is for shoveling. Your wife is a counter-revolutionary's daughter. Be grateful you're not in a re-education camp." I sipped my tea, saying nothing. This was the first consequence. The removal of the protective buffer I had built around him. Then came the issue of the school. The commune had finally secured funding to open a small primary school and was recruiting teachers from among the educated youth. Leo, with his city education and inherent arrogance, saw it as his birthright. He and Clara both took the simple aptitude test. According to my friend, they both scored at the top. But when the list was posted, she continued, leaning forward, their names weren't on it. Leo was furious. He stormed into the commune office, demanding to see their scores, demanding an explanation. The official there had been blunt. "Comrade Song," he'd said, not even looking up from his paperwork. "Your test scores are irrelevant. You failed the political review. Your family connection makes you unsuitable to shape the minds of the next generation. You and your wife are a political liability. Now please leave. You're disturbing my work." My friend watched my face for a reaction. He looked like he'd been shot, Maya. He just stood there, white as a sheet. And Clara, she started crying, of course. But I saw the way he looked at her when they walked out. It wasn't love in his eyes. It was blame. The final piece of news was the most telling. The 500 yuan his parents had given him, a small fortune in the countryside, was gone. Vanished. Clara, accustomed to a certain level of comfort funded indirectly by me, had insisted on spending it. Not on practical things, but on a new wool coat from the county town, fancy leather shoes, and tins of expensive biscuits. The money had evaporated in a matter of months. "And now," my friend said, finishing her tea, "they're broke. Truly broke. Leo's work points barely cover their basic grain rations. I heard they had a huge fight. He accused her of being wasteful. She cried and said he'd promised her a better life. This was the unraveling I had foreseen. Leo was discovering that love, especially the dramatic, rebellious kind, did not fill your stomach or keep you warm in winter. He was tasting the bitter dregs of the future he had chosen so fervently. A few weeks later, the ghost materialized. I was coming back from the market with Alex, our arms linked, when I saw a ragged figure standing at the gate of our housing compound. Took me a moment to recognize him. Leo. His once proud posture was slumped. His city clothes, which he had always kept so fastidiously clean, were stained and threadbare. His face was thin, etched with a new, permanent bitterness. He saw me and froze. His eyes darted from my face to Alex's, then to our linked arms. A complex storm of emotions, shock, jealousy, and a desperate, pathetic hope, crossed his features. Alex felt me tense. "Maya," he murmured. "It's Leo," I whispered. Leo took a step forward. "Maya." His voice was hoarse. I need to talk to you." Alex moved slightly, positioning himself between us. "She has nothing to say to you." Leo ignored him, his eyes pleading with me. "Please. Just 5 minutes. It's about my parents." I nodded at Alex. "It's okay. Wait for me here." I walked with Leo to a bench a short distance away. The air around him smelled of sweat and despair. "What do you want, Leo?" He sank onto the bench, his head in his hands. "It's a nightmare, Maya. A living nightmare. The work, it's backbreaking. They treat me like a criminal. And Clara." He let out a bitter, broken laugh. "She's useless. She can't cook, she can't clean, she just sits there and expects me to provide for her. And when I can't, she nags. Constantly." I remained silent, letting his words hang in the air. He had wanted a delicate, cultured flower. He was now complaining about its inability to withstand a storm. "I need to come home, Maya," he said, his voice cracking. "I need a permit. You have connections. Your family. Can you help me?" "Just me. I'll leave her there. I have to get out." There was the selfishness fully formed. He was willing to abandon the woman for whom he had sacrificed everything. "I can't help you, Leo," I said, my voice calm and final. "Why not?" he demanded, a flash of his old arrogance surfacing. "After everything we had? Our childhood? Our engagement?" "That engagement was a joke, remember?" I replied coolly. "You said so yourself. And your parents, they've been suspended because of your marriage. Their careers are over. Their connections are gone. You destroyed the very ladder you now want to climb." The truth was a physical blow. He flinched, his shoulders slumping further. They won't even see me. They changed the locks." "You made your choice," I said, standing up. "You chose Claire. You have to live with that choice." I turned and walked back to Alex, who was watching me with a mixture of concern and pride. I took his arm, feeling its solid strength. Behind us, I heard a single choked sob followed by the sound of Leo stumbling away. He was a sinking ship and he had just thrown the only life preserver overboard. He was going back to the village. Back to Claire. Back to the prison he had built with his own 2 hands. And I knew with a cold certainty that the worst was yet to come. The news from the village when it next trickled in was darker. Leo had returned from his failed trip to the city a changed man. The last vestiges of hope had been extinguished. The charming, intellectual facade had crumbled completely, revealing the petulant, entitled core beneath. The man who had once written poetry for Clara now had nothing for her but resentment. The arguments began in earnest. They were no longer about money but about blame. "You and your traitor father," Leo would shout, his voice carrying through the thin walls of the educated youth point. "You've ruined my life. You were the one who promised me the world." Clara would shriek back, her tears now weapons of guilt. "You said you'd take care of me. You're nothing but a failure. A city boy who can't even handle a little farm work." The other educated youths who had once envied their epic romance now watched the drama with a kind of morbid fascination. The fairy tale had curdled into a sordid public spectacle. One night, fueled by cheap, harsh baijiu he had traded his last decent pair of trousers for, Leo finally crossed a line. Clara had nagged him about the cold, about the thinness of their quilts, about her hunger. Something in him snapped. The sound of the slap was like a gunshot in the quiet night. It was followed by a moment of stunned silence and then Clara's screams, not cries of sadness but of pure, outraged fury. She didn't run to him for comfort. She ran out of the door into the darkness, straight to the one person she knew still harbored feelings for her. David Chen. David, the quiet, intense production team leader, had watched Leo's decline with a grim satisfaction. He had always loved Clara from afar, considering Leo an unworthy city fop. When Clara appeared at his door, her cheek red and swollen, tears streaming down her face, his protective instincts and his long-suppressed desire exploded. He stormed over to the educated youth point, dragged a drunken, bewildered Leo from his bed and beat him savagely. There were no officials to intervene, no one to smooth things over. The beating was brutal and public, a message to the entire village. Leo's song was now fair game. He had no protector. After that, Leo's life became a study in humiliation. He was assigned the worst tasks, given the lowest work points and subjected to constant ridicule. He was a pariah, tethered to a woman he despised and trapped in a life he loathed. And Clara? Clara adapted. He saw the writing on the wall. Leo was a sunk cost. The 500 yuan was gone, his parents had disowned him and he was clearly never getting back to the city. But David Chen, he was the production team leader. He had power here. He had resources. I learned the details from a long, gossipy letter from my old friend. She wrote with a novelist's flair for the dramatic. "You wouldn't believe it, Maya," she wrote. "Clara has started volunteering at the production team office, helping David with his paperwork. She brings him lunch. They take long walks together after dark. Everyone sees it. Everyone knows. But what can Leo do? He's powerless." The other day Leo confronted her. He accused her of being unfaithful. And do you know what she said? She looked him right in the eye with that innocent little face of hers and said, "There's nothing between David and me. We're just two people who share the same ideals." When I read that line, a cold, mirthless laugh escaped me. The exact same words Leo had once used on me. The boomerang of betrayal had finally swung back and struck him square in the chest. The irony was so perfect it was cruel. The letter concluded with the final, desperate act. Leo, pushed to the brink, demanded a divorce. Clara's response was reportedly icy calm. "Fine," she said. "I'll agree to a divorce. But only if you get me a permit back to the city. If I can't go back, then you're not leaving me. We'll rot here together." It was the ultimate trap. He had no way to get a permit. His only hope had been his parents, and he had burned that bridge to the ground. She knew it. She was chaining him to her, out of spite, out of a refusal to be the one left behind in this muddy purgatory. It was this final, impossible demand that sent him back to the city for the second time, the one where I had seen him looking broken and ragged at the compound gate. He had come to beg his parents, to beg me for a way out. And we had all turned him away. He returned to the village defeated. The last of his spirit was broken. He was a ghost shuffling through his days, a shell of the boy I had once known. The stage was set. The players were in position. All that was needed was the final tragic act. And in the oppressive heat of a late summer night, with the cicadas screaming in the trees, Leo Song decided to write the ending himself. The news reached the city not through a letter, but through a terse, official phone call my father received from a colleague with connections to the Public Security Bureau. It was a shocking, gruesome story that was already making the rounds in confidential briefings. I was at the Wong's apartment helping Mrs. Wong wrap dumplings when my father came in. His face was pale, his expression grim. "Maya," he said quietly. "There's been an incident. In your old village. It's about Leo." My hands, dusted with flour, stilled. Alex, who was rolling out the dumpling skins, looked up, his face full of concern. "What kind of incident?" I asked, though a cold dread was already coiling in my stomach. "He's dead," my father said bluntly. "And Clara Vance. And the production team leader, David Chen." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. "How?" "It was a fire. In the grain drying yard." He said it. He poured kerosene around a large pile of straw where Clara and David Chen were together. He trapped them inside and set it alight. A collective gasp went around the room. Mrs. Wong dropped her dumpling, the filling spilling onto the table. "The fire burned for over an hour," my father continued, his voice low. "It was too intense for anyone to get close. By the time it died down, there was nothing left. Just charred remains. They could only identify them by what was left nearby." I saw it in my mind as clearly as if I had been there. The dark, open yard under a moonless sky. The pile of straw. The two figures inside, unaware. And Leo, a silent, vengeful shadow, circling them with a can of kerosene, his love and his life curdled into pure, homicidal hatred. The match striking. The whoosh of flame, hungry and immediate. The screams swallowed by the roaring inferno. "He didn't run," my father said. "He walked straight to the local public security office and turned himself in. Confessed to everything. He only made one request before his transfer. He asked to see you, Maya." My blood ran cold. "See me? Why?" My father shook his head. "They didn't say. But given your history, the authorities have agreed to a brief, supervised visit. They think he might provide some closure." Alex stood up. "No. Absolutely not. You're not going. He's a murderer." I looked at my flour-dusted hands, at the peaceful domestic scene around me. This was my life now. Safe, warm, loved. But the past was a ghost that refused to be exorcised. It was reaching out from the grave with a final, bloody hand. "I have to go," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I need to see for myself that it's really over." 2 days later, I found myself in a cold, sterile visiting room in a provincial detention center. The air smelled of disinfectant and despair. Alex insisted on coming with me, waiting outside. When they brought Leo in, I barely recognized him. He was shackled, his prison uniform hanging loosely on his gaunt frame. His face was a mask of hollowed-out exhaustion, but his eyes burned with a feverish, knowing light. They fixed on me the moment he entered the room. He sat down across from me, the guard standing a discreet distance away. Why, he rasped. A slow, terrible smile stretched his cracked lips. You came back too, didn't you? The question hung in the air, nonsensical and chilling. What are you talking about, Leo? In this life, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You remember, don't you? The other life. The one where you forced me to go back to the city with you. The one where you ruined everything. My heart stopped. He wasn't talking about regret. He was talking about knowing. He remembered. I stared at him, my face a careful frozen mask. I gave nothing away. He took my silence for confirmation. His smile vanished, replaced by a torrent of furious, spittle-flecked accusation. Why? He demanded, his voice rising to a shout, making the guard shift his weight. Why in this life did you just leave me there? Why didn't you fight for me? Why did you let me stay with that whore? The guard took a step forward. Control yourself, prisoner. Leo ignored him, his bloodshot eyes boring into me, consumed by a regret so vast it had tipped into madness. You were supposed to save me from her. That was your job. You loved me. You were always there to clean up my messes. Why did you stop? The sheer, unvarnished entitlement of it, even now, even after everything, was breathtaking. He saw himself as the victim of my inaction. I leaned forward slowly, my voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss that only he could hear. You want to know why, Leo? Because I remember. I remember you drugging me. I remember you pushing me onto David Chen's bed. I remember you ruining my life to protect your precious white moonlight. I watched the words land, each one a hammer blow. His eyes widened in shock, then horror as he realized the full scope of my knowledge. This wasn't just a change of heart. This was retribution. In this life, I continued, my gaze unwavering, I gave you exactly what you said you wanted. I didn't force you. I didn't tell your parents. I let you have your great love. So tell me, Leo Song. I paused, letting the silence stretch. What are you crying for? It was the final, absolute truth. There was no one else to blame. The architect of his own hell was staring back at him from the mirror of my eyes. The fight went out of him all at once. The furious energy drained away, leaving behind a broken, weeping wreck. He slumped in his chair, great, shuddering sobs racking his body. He was crying for the life he threw away, for the love he betrayed, for the monstrous end he had engineered with his own hands. I stood up. I felt no pity, no satisfaction. Just a vast, echoing emptiness. The last ghost had been laid to rest. I hope you find the peace in death you could never find in life, Leo, I said, and I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I pushed open the heavy door, stepped out of the gloom, and into the clean, bright light of the afternoon. Alex was waiting for me, his face full of worry. He didn't ask any questions. He simply opened his arms and I walked into them, burying my face in his shoulder. He held me tightly, a solid, warm anchor in the storm. When I finally looked up, I saw he was holding a small, fragrant bouquet of orange blossoms. Here, he said softly, offering them to me. To sweep away the misfortune. From now on, smooth sailing only. I took the flowers, their sweet, hopeful scent filling my senses. I looked from his kind face to the wide, blue sky above, and for the first time, I felt the last cold shard of the past finally melt away. I smiled, a real, true smile that reached my eyes. You're right, I said, my voice clear and strong. After letting go of a worthless man, only good days lie ahead. The world after Leo's death was different. It was as if a persistent low-frequency hum I had grown so accustomed to that I no longer noticed it had suddenly ceased. The silence that remained was profound, and in that silence, my new life could truly begin to bloom. The visit to the detention center was a closed chapter, a grim folktale I had no desire to revisit. Alex, bless him, never pressed me for details. He simply filled the space Leo's ghost had vacated with a steady, unwavering presence. He was there with a terrible joke when the silence felt too heavy, with a cup of hot tea when I stared into the distance for a moment too long, with a warm hand to hold when we walked through the bustling city streets. My parents, shaken by the brutal end of the boy they had once considered a son-in-law, became more present. Their work was still their passion, but they made a conscious effort to come home for dinner more often. Our apartment, once a dusty way station, began to feel like a home. The sound of my father discussing his research with Alex and my mother asking me about my day wove a new tapestry of normalcy and love. The Wang family became my second family in truth. I did, as Mrs. Wang had predicted, grow a little tired of lamb soup, but I would never tell her that. Her nurturing was a language of love and I was fluent in its grammar now. Mr. Wang, a quiet man with a sharp mind, took a liking to Alex and began involving him in small projects, teaching him the intricacies of managing the state-owned textile factory he now oversaw. Months turned into a year. The sharp edges of the past softened, sanded down by the gentle, consistent waves of a happy present. One evening as Alex and I were walking home from his parents' house, the setting sun painting the city in hues of gold and rose, he stopped me under the canopy of a blooming plum tree. "You know," he said, his tone uncharacteristically shy, "we got married for all the wrong reasons. Or maybe the right ones depending on how you look at it. Stability. Clarity. A treaty between two families." I smiled. "It was a very good treaty." "It was," he agreed, taking my hands. "But Maya, it's become so much more than that for me. This thing between us, it's not just an arrangement anymore, is it?" I looked at our joined hands, then up into his earnest, hopeful face. I thought of his kindness, his humor, his steadfastness. I thought of the way my heart no longer felt like a bruised, defensive thing, but something light and open and capable of soaring. "No, Alex," I said, my voice soft with certainty. "It hasn't been just an arrangement for a long, long time." The relief and joy that blossomed on his face was brighter than the setting sun. "Good," he whispered, leaning his forehead against mine. "That's very, very good. Life, I was learning, was not about dramatic, all-consuming passions that burned you to ash. It was about this. It was about quiet understanding, shared laughter, and a partnership built on mutual respect. It was about building a future brick by steady brick instead of chasing a fleeting, destructive fantasy." Another year passed. The political winds began to shift ever so slightly. The emphasis was slowly moving from class struggle to economic development. My parents were reinstated to their research projects, their expertise once again deemed vital for the nation's progress. The shadow that had fallen over them because of their association with the Song family finally lifted. One afternoon I was visiting Auntie May. The severance from Leo had aged her, but a fragile peace had returned to her eyes. We never spoke of him directly, but on this day as she poured my tea she said quietly, "You have built a good life for yourself, Maya. A strong one. I'm happy for you. A mother always wants to see the children she loves find happiness." Tears pricked my eyes. She was including me in that statement, absolving me of any lingering guilt. "Thank you, Auntie May. It is the way of life," she said with a sad, wise smile. "We plant seeds. Some grow into beautiful trees. Others are choked by weeds. We cannot blame the seed for the weeds. We can only tend the garden we have." Her words settled in my soul. He was right. I had spent a lifetime tending a garden that was not mine. Now I had my own plot of land, my own sun, my own rain. That night as I lay in bed with Alex, his arm draped comfortably over me, I placed my hand on my stomach. I had been feeling unwell for a few weeks, a strange fluttering nausea that was entirely new. A suspicion, wild and wonderful, had begun to grow in my heart. A few days later a doctor confirmed it. I was pregnant. When I told Alex, he stared at me for a full minute, his mouth agape. Then he let out a whoop of joy that I was sure the whole compound could hear. He swept me into his arms, spinning me around until we were both dizzy with laughter and happiness. "This," he declared, his eyes shining, "this is the beginning of everything. Our everything." As my belly swelled with new life, the last vestiges of the old world seemed to fade away. The story of Leo, Clara, and David became a tragic cautionary tale whispered about in the village, a stark reminder of the dangers of passion and poor choices. Here in the city, it was just a sad piece of history irrelevant to the future we were building. The day my daughter was born, the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. They placed her in my arms, a tiny, perfect creature with a shock of dark hair and Alex's kind eyes. I held her, this living, breathing testament to my second chance, and I knew that the cycle of pain and betrayal was truly finally broken. I named her Anne, which means peace. Looking down at her sleeping face, surrounded by my husband, my parents, and my chosen family, I knew that the path behind me, for all its pain, had led me here. To this moment. To this love. To this peace. The storm was over. The sails were unfurled. And the sea ahead was calm, wide, and bathed in golden light. The end.